I'm your host, Jack, your failure connoisseur, and today my guest is Dan Hardaker. Now, Dan is the Director of Digital Design and co-owner at Procter & Stevenson. Now, Procter's is one of the UK's longest established full-service marketing agencies offering business-to-business marketing, strategy, branding, and technology. They basically do it all. And Dan is one of the longest-serving employees, having been there for 11 years and 8 months, according to his LinkedIn today when I checked. Clients include Panasonic, Epson, and Southwest Water, to name a few. But if this agency is such a well-established and maybe more traditional agency, you might think that they are stuck in their ways, stuffy, less forward-thinking. But that is far from the truth. This agency is quick to adopt new technology, and Dan is hyper aware of available tools and tech out there, as you're about to find out. Their new website, built on Webflow, and their explorations of how to use Webflow more broadly with their enterprise clients are helping to push the UK Webflow market forward. So I am very excited to have Dan on the podcast today. Now, you might think life has always been pretty rosy for Dan. If you look at him now with his formidable team, enterprise clients, beautiful office in the heart of Bristol. But as you may have guessed, there's been some fundamental lessons along the way to get here. The fails that we talk about today in today's episode is clear communication, comprehensive testing, and due diligence in hiring. Dan, welcome to the Webflow podcast.
Great, thanks, Jack. What a welcome that is. Wow, it sounds pretty impressive when you read all that out. And just to think we're here in Bristol, servicing clients all around the world, it's good to kind of hear that back. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's a little pep talk today if you needed it. Yeah, it's just like you've achieved so much already. It's really exciting. And like I said, you're now joining the Webflow community as an agency, which is huge in my head. But before we get into that, what is your relationship with failure?
Wow. I suppose it's one of those things you have to kind of come to learn from, experience from, and grow from. Failure isn't one of those things that you should think, I should never achieve. It's actually, it helps you grow. So the more you learn from your failures, the better you become, getting things done quicker, thinking about how you do things more proactively, thinking about your failures and going, I don't really want to do that again. But nevertheless, you may, but it's okay. You just got to get used to being uncomfortable, getting used to some of those failures happening and then working your way through them.
Yeah, one of the bits of copy on your website, which I thought was really telling, was since 1979, we've made our name by accepting marketing challenges other agencies might shy away from and refusing to accept the concept of a comfort zone, which I think is such an interesting. Can you just break that down for me? Why is Procter's different from other agencies, in your opinion, then?
So if you look at the outside of our building, look at us on Google Street View, you'll see a big, massive yes up the side of our wall. And that is about us saying yes more than no. We've also got a poster. Now, it used to be above Roger's desk, who was our original founder, who set the business up back in 1979 and has recently been taken over by me and some of the rest of the team here. And it's now above Elsa's desk, which is to say yes more than no. And she's our current MD. And that's what we do, is we take on those challenges that some others might not. It's about going and working in countries you may not have gone and worked in the past. It's taking on those opportunities that most people go, it's a bit risky, don't want to do that. So for us, that's our mantra. It's always to say yes more than no. And that kind of fits into what you were saying around failures earlier. It's if you take it on and it doesn't work, that's okay. At least you've tried. There's nothing worse than a regret. There's nothing worse than saying no and then thinking, oh, do you know what? I should have done that. So that's kind of the principle behind it, is to say yes more than no. That's kind of how we run. And that's how the teams here across all the different disciplines work and work together. Doesn't mean we're doing things we shouldn't be doing and, not doing things properly. It's about having a go. It's about going, let's try this. Let's try something a little bit different. And when you're working in the B2B sphere, as we do, you can often be perceived as doing B2B is a bit boring, but our mantra is to go, let's make it a bit different. Let's make it work. Let's make it work for the businesses we're working for. Yeah, so that's our kind of guiding principle, really. Yes, more than no.
Yeah, I love that, because I think when people might think of like a traditional agency that's been around for 40, 50 years, you might not think, oh, they would adopt new technologies. They would be doing the type of client projects that they're working on. Your website itself has just been completely revamped and built on Webflow, which I think is really telling of like how forward thinking you are as an agency. Can you tell us a little bit about why Webflow? I mean, you're working with massive clients, these big enterprise companies that I imagine might not even be that familiar with Webflow as a platform. And, why are you now adopting Webflow as maybe a more traditional agency?
I think it's listening to what your client's after. When a client saying to you, I've got to be able to do this myself, or I need to do it now, I need to get some marketing collateral out, I need to be able to manage my own website, I need to be able to do all the things that is in my mind, I need to be able to actually deliver on it. You've got to start thinking about, okay, what's the right platform for you to be able to do that? If you look at some of the biggest CMS systems out there in the world these days, you need your front enders, you need your back enders, you need your DevOps engineers, you need security on servers, you need all of these infrastructures in place to do that. Now, you can configure some of these systems to be able to be, as flexible as a marketeer requires, but sometimes they don't have the budgets. Even these big organizations, they don't have the budgets. They have a requirement to deliver what their marketing ambitions are. And you've got to think about what's the best technology to deliver that. So when you look at Webflow, it starts to cut out all of that time and effort needed to be able to do some things that others see as being pretty simple. The kind of thing that I like to look at it, Alf, is everybody who works in a marketeer team, whether that's Panasonic, whether that's Epson, whether that's any other big large organization, they sometimes do things outside of their own work. They might work in a gym, they might work in, I don't know, they might have their own sweet shop, and they go out and they do their own marketing at the weekend, they do their own Instagram posts, they do various things. So they know how easy it is to do using small scale systems like Squarespace, like your Wix. But when it comes to actually delivering that at an enterprise level, that's where you then probably hit your limit with those kinds of systems. So you need something that can do that heavy lifting. And that's why you start to look at what's on the market. And that's why we started looking at Webflow around 8 years ago to go, okay, what's out there in the ether to help support the marketeer? So that's kind of where our starting point has come from it, really.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess as Webflow has become more maybe enterprise orientated in the sense that, I guess they had to do the basics well, which, served the freelancer. And I feel like more recently they've recognized that, larger organizations, are really interested in Webflow and they can serve them really well with DevLink and all the Webflow app marketplace and all these recent features, which I do feel like not only help the freelancer, and I'm not trying to say that they don't care about the freelancer, but it's more like, okay, we've got a huge proportion of, the Webflow market out there in the enterprise space to be challenging WordPress and Drupal and all these other kind of big, website builders or platforms that they can take them on. And it's really cool that Proctors is engaging with Webflow, I think, because it feels like if more and more big companies are aware of Webflow and adopt that platform, then that obviously has a trickle down effect. Can you tell me a little bit about that and maybe how you're thinking about that? Because I know that you are very engaged with, thinking about the enterprise market in the UK for Webflow.
Yeah. So working with Webflow in the UK, we are in a funny geolocation. When you talk in America, it's British. There aren't translations. There aren't those kinds of issues to think about. Now, being in the UK and working in Europe, you have French, Italian. You also have different nationalities working within the UK, and to be able to think about a system that allows for translations and allows for Arabic left to right. We've got a lot multicultural society within the UK. Being able to think about that and being able to deliver on that is a really key aspect of it. So when you're looking at Webflow and when you're looking at these systems, these bigger systems can do that, but it costs a lot of money to do it. And you can see what Webflow are doing over time. Like you just mentioned, they've built a system out, they've got it right. We were using Weglot a couple of years ago, we now got localization. And the more that system within Webflow are kind of looking at the market, what's required, and then building that as part of the core is really, really valuable. So from a UK perspective and us thinking about it and working with B2B organizations that are working internationally, being able to have things like localization, thinking about SEO best practices from a localization market is super critical. And to not have that would be a detriment. So now seeing that these things are coming on board, really, really valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so exciting. And also, I feel like this is worth saying that Proctors is doing a lot of engendering the next generation of designers. We got design awards that you do. You have interns that I've actually met at one of the meetups that we had at your offices, and I was really impressed by like the caliber of these kind of award-winning interns that you'd got. And it's an amazing thing that you're doing from the community aspect of the design and development world. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what your thoughts are on the community aspect? Because that does seem to be a big part of Proctor's identity.
Yeah, it's massive. And the thing is you've got to be able to look after that talent. You've got to be able to guide them and show them. But you've also got to be aware that they know an awful lot about things from being at university or being environments where they're learning quite fast around low code no code technologies and the things that they want to do and the entrepreneurial spirit that a lot of these the younger generation have. So to ignore that as a market and not to nurture that and not to help that grow would be very detrimental, I think, to agencies across the UK and organisations as such. So we do the design awards. The idea around that is to take students in their last year of university, normally quite a stressful time, but nevertheless it's where they're starting to get their work to a really good calibre of standard. What we do is we ask them to share that work they've delivered at university, enter it into our competition, which covers off 3 categories. We look at motion graphics, we look at digital design, and we look at traditional graphic design as well. And they submit that work that they've done. We go through, I think we had 250 applicants last year from the Southwest region, hoping for more this year. We select the top 10 out of that, and then we have an award ceremony the following week later, where we then go through that work. A part of the prize for that is to do a 3-month internship with us. We offer a financial reward with that as well. And one of the team who are working here currently are from that background. They entered the award, they did the 3-month internship with us, and then have been working with us for 2 years now. So in terms of being able to identify what the students are doing these days and bringing them in then into the creative industry is absolutely paramount. And then being able to understand how their minds are thinking is really, really important. Brings a lot of life into our organization and our business as well.
Awesome. Okay, we've got a lot of young listeners on the Webflow podcast. If you're listening to this now, this is an award worth going for. So this is later this summer, is it, Dan?
Yeah, we were taking applicants now. Closing dates, I can't give you off the top of my head, Jack. I'll TBC you on that. But if you go to Swords, and we'll share the URL with you later. There's the entry application form in there. Just sign up online, share some work, and we'll see if you can make it to the last top 10.
Awesome. I'll put the link in the show notes. If you're listening to this and you want to work at a top agency, please apply. If you're in the UK, it's well worth it. Their offices are beautiful. You'll learn tons. There's amazing staff there. I can't speak about it enough. Okay, with that being said, let's say we've got a young gun in the Webflow space listening to this podcast. They're like, Dan, if you were to give one piece of advice to a Webflower that's trying to get to where you are, let's say they're right back, young 18-year-old Dan, like what advice would you give them to maybe get into the creative industry, start working with amazing clients and maybe foster the next generation even? I mean, that's such a broad question, but do you have anything that's like gold dust for anyone that's listening now?
I think it's interesting what you mentioned at the start is around failure. Don't be as scared to fail. Get yourself out there. If you don't put yourself in a position to be recognized, to be rewarded, to be, given criticism on, you'll never grow. So the first thing I can ever suggest is get that website built that you've been waiting to do. Push it to the boundaries of where you can take it and take criticism on it. Don't be offended by it. Build on it, use it, and let it help you grow. My biggest thing is always about the community. Find out where those hotspots are in your region, whether that's Bristol, London, wherever that may be. Go talk to people, learn from people. Don't be afraid to think everybody's better than you. You always, as a younger person, tend to get in fear of, oh, am I good enough? Can I really do this? You are, you can, and you will be if you try, if you ask the right questions, if you do all of those things. So for me, it's all about having a go. It's that yes more than no that I mentioned at the start. Just go for it, and you'll soon then find out what works for you. But yeah, that would probably be my top advice on that.
I love that. I'm just going to piggyback off that. I think when you start putting yourself out there, if you're pushing a car up a hill and people see that you are trying to push that car up the hill, they'll come and help you push that car up the hill. And I think it's the same goes for putting yourself out there. This phrase that sounds quite elusive, but in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, that means share your work publicly online on social media, ask for feedback from people that you aspire to have the skill sets of, And you'd be surprised how willing people are that are a bit ahead of you are willing to help you, because naturally they got to where they are because they were supported in their journey as well. So there's also tons of talks, tons of free events that are happening the whole time. Chris Skitch from Structured by Design in London, he does monthly Webflow meetups for free. They are free. Go and talk to interesting people. And in Bristol, there's going to be more talks coming up shortly as well. I'm sure we're going to do some more meetups in the coming months as well. So it's all out there, is my advice to younger people who message me online. Like, it's up to you, and you can go and do whatever you want to do. Dan, can I ask you a little bit about doing whatever you want to do? Just as I was finishing that, I thought this is the right time. You've worked with clients in Saudi Arabia, America, all over, like you say. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think you were going to get to where you are now? Was this like the game plan that kind of mapped out, or were you just following your nose and then opportunities presented themselves as you did the basics well over time?
God, yeah. Did I ever expect to get to where I am now? No. Did I ever expect to go on the journey I've been on? No. And in actual fact, I was talking to my mom at the weekend because I just got back from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And she said to me, how'd you get on? And I said, yeah, it was really good. Gave her a bit of information. She said, did you ever think you'd be doing this? Exactly what you just said to me, Jack. And I said, not really, Mum. Do you get nervous about it? I said, no, not really. Not anymore, Mum. You kind of get used to it. But the best thing about it is seizing those opportunities. When my first opportunity came, probably my bigger opportunity came starting working here nearly 10 years ago. I was a year into working here. And Roger, at the time, who was the MD, had mentioned to me, we've had an RFP come in to design Saudi Arabian Airlines. Would you be interested in tackling it and taking on? I said, yeah, absolutely. Just by saying that, it gave him the confidence that I knew what I was doing, and he gave me the confidence by asking me to do it. Now, you get into one of those scenarios where you feel like he knows I can do it, but he doesn't know that I don't feel I can do it. But that person believes in me, and you automatically start to rub off on people around you when you're in that scenario. And you get the team around you, and the team are then all working on it, and you start to really feel it really empowered. And before you know it, you're in the Middle East, you're presenting in a big board meeting, and you're presenting your ideas, and you're thinking, crikey, this is a little bit surreal. But you have to just take these things on. You just have to go with it. And that, for me, is the bit that I've always enjoyed the most, is that I don't know what I'm going to be doing next year compared to what I'm doing this year. And our business changes, I would say, every 3 years. What we were doing 3 years ago isn't the same as what we're doing today, and what we'll be doing in 3 years' time, I don't know if we'll be doing what we're doing now. But to embrace what's going on in the world, what's going on within your organization, and listening to others is the most exciting thing you can ever do. I'd love to know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years' time, because if it's doing more than what I do now, I can't wait to get there.
That's an epic answer. I love that you're just like, opportunities come up, you take them, you do the best job you can, and more opportunities come out of that initial opportunity. I'd imagine, just like
Absolutely.
Showing the work that you want to get and that whole idea. But it's really humbling to know that you got asked by your mum, did you think you were going to be doing what you're doing? And you're just like, you're literally like a co-owner of an 80 plus person agency, and it's just it's funny how humbling your mum's questions are. I find it's just
Always.
like, yeah, they're just like, yeah, what are you up to? They just don't really, they're just kind of, I don't know, kind of levels you, which is
absolutely
really nice.
Every time. Yeah, it's great.
So you're at your zenith, you are doing what you love, you want to do it for another 10 years at least, and that's really, really cool in my head, because it seems like you're fulfilled doing what you're doing, and you're culturing the next generation. You're kind of giving back to the design and development community that's obviously given you so much on your journey. But it hasn't always been this way. Now, I want to dive into your deepest, darkest secrets that you've sent me over by email. Tell me about failure number 1. Clear communication.
Yeah, so clear communication. For me, and everyone in the organization here will understand what I say to them when I talk about clear communication. Whenever anybody joins our organization, the one thing I always ask for is clear communication. And I say it's a part of everything that we do. It's from the way you communicate to say that you've finished at the end of the day, or to say that I'm not sure what it is that I'm doing. If you're clear in your communication, it's absolutely paramount. And sometimes communication doesn't happen. And that happens from either our side, or it might not happen from a client side. Client side is a very difficult one to manage, because they think they're telling you everything that you need to know. Here's my design. Can you go and build it for me in Webflow? Yeah, no problem. Just a couple of questions I need to ask here. And you start going into those questions, and they go, "Don't hang on, sorry, I thought you knew what you were doing. We know what we're doing, but what we want to do is just get a little bit more information out of you, so we can make sure we can build out realistically what you want." And it's those kinds of things that are the hardest thing to deal with, really, is that aspect of it. When somebody sends you a Figma design, I've got a landing page, I want you to build it. We can go away and we can go and get that built. But do you want that full screen, or do you want that fixed? How are you looking at it on your screen? What's your mobile responsive expecting to be like? And they go, you can crack on with that. You go away, you crack on with it, and you go, oh, well, I was actually expecting to do that. And you think, that's why we asked at the start of the conversation, what is it you're looking to do? So I think for me, clear communication, it comes from both sides. I think us as experienced people in terms of what we do, we've got to get in there and we've got to ask those difficult questions, whether they like it or not. That shows our experience, our wealth, our knowledge. And in terms of managing their budget much more successfully, that's what we're here for. And whether that client reciprocates with the answers that you're looking for, who knows? But we've had many a time where I've taken on a job for a very small budget and expected the next thing to happen. So you build the website and they go, okay, well, what about doing this? Can we do this? Can we do this? Well, we'd originally stuck with the scope. We were going to build this out for you, and now the scope's starting to change. So you've got to be able to just think about, okay, Leonard's what we were talking about earlier, those failures that have happened in the past where I've gone over budget on something. I've got to learn from that to make sure that I don't over this next period. And it's really important to share that in a team as well, to make sure that those people who are working on a job that might be very similar to the one you've taken on before, they're aware of that information. So we've got to keep communicating. We've got to keep everything happening internally, externally as best we can.
Oh my God. Okay. So many questions to ask here. So let's say there's an agency owner listening to this podcast, and they might have a small agency. They might have 4 or 5 people in a team, say. But do you do like a post-mortem after the project? Everyone writes down their own experience of, the different parts, and then it's kind of in some kind of Notion doc, which is like, then you might have a meeting like once a month with the whole team to be like, okay, here's what we did this month, here's what we learned, or kind of how does that work like logistically within the agency, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, cool. So as a project process, we have we call it a 4D process. So it's discover, design, develop, deploy. And that's our process for being able to deliver a project. And if we follow the processes within inside each of those areas, we should come out at the other end in the way we'd expect it to. But like I say, there's sometimes some anomalies that happen along the way on that. And we do have a post-mortem at the end. We check in on each other all the time. How's the project going? How's the delivery of it going? A lot of the time it happens with the management of the account manager. Our account manager will normally instruct that based on time spent on the job, utilization in terms of how much time was used on one area compared to another. So we spent too much on design compared to the build. Why was that the case? So I would say there's more touch points throughout the process as opposed to doing it right at the end. But it is normally the account manager that will bring us in all in a huddle. And we'll go through that and we'll try and work out what those issues were. And then that might come in and reflect a slightly adaptational change within our 4D process. Or it might be a case that actually we asked the wrong question, or we didn't ask the right question at the start of the project. So let's think about bringing that into our questionnaire, which we normally send out at the start of a project. So there's those aspects to it. As a core team, as a digital design team who are designing the site and building the site out in Webflow, we have weekly catch-ups, and that's to do a couple of things. That's to talk about things we've learned, whether that's either working on a project or we found outside in our own time, or someone's come across something, new business updates in terms of letting each other know in terms of where we are with certain job, whether we were winning that, whether we didn't win something or something along those lines. What was the outcome of that? Was it we were too expensive, or we didn't show enough experience in a particular area? So there's those kinds of things there that we have as a team as well.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the core.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. So discover, design, develop, deploy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really, really good framework for anyone that's kind of thinking about that. And then within those steps, you've got kind of micro steps that I guess you take the client through, and then the whole team is, aware of your own internal systems. And then I guess if anything comes up, like you said, anomalies, etc., you can kind of work through that. But then there's the actual proposals and maybe before the job even starts, like, why did we not get that job? And that's a completely different kind of part of this, working out why things didn't work. It's not so much like on the job, it's like before the job even happened, why did we not get that job? So yeah. Okay. Really, really interesting to learn a little bit more about that. I think a lot of Webflowers are quite scared of asking questions that might be perceived as dumb. And I think one thing that I've learned from being around some more experienced designers and developers in agencies like Edgar Allan is that they're not afraid of asking the dumb question. They'll just brazenly be like, why do you think you need a new website? Because I don't really see why. Which in my head, I'm like, wow, that's quite a, like, we've had 3 meetings and, we're coming back to this point, even though they've kind of given us the answer. But it seems like quite a bold thing to ask 3 meetings in with a budget that's pretty big. But I think one thing that I've learned is that asking the dumb question, or asking the question that might be perceived as dumb, actually is far more revealing than trying to sound cleverer than you are. And I think it's one massive telltale sign of someone that's more experienced versus less experienced. They're not trying to be anything than they're not. But when a client does say, whoa, you should really know that. You're the experts. How do you navigate that? Because let's say, someone who's less experienced, they might be a bit scared to ask a question that they might be perceived as like not knowing what they should know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we try to use data a lot to kind of back things up. Data is probably the key aspect of being able to justify the reasons why or why not you should be doing something. So, being able to have Microsoft Clarity installed on a site so you can start to look at user behavior. Right? This is showing me this website isn't converting because of X, Y, and Z, and I've got data here to back it up. I've got your Google Analytics in terms of certain drop-off areas there. Data is going to be the core part in which I'm going to go back to somebody on and justify a reason or a rationale on it. The other aspect might be experience, but experience is a difficult one to kind of always justify because experience is based on what I know at that moment in time. And one thing I never try to do is pretend that I know their business better than them. I'm never going to know anybody's business any way, shape or form better than them. And I always make that very clear at the start of a meeting. You know your business better than I do, but I know user experience, I know user interface design, and I know how to get a Webflow website built. But if you give me the information you need, I can then come back to you and give you all the justification around how we get that communicated much more effectively for you. So I think a part of that is being humble in terms of going, I don't know your business, you inform me of what that is, but then sharing that back with them and going, okay, well, this is what my recommendation would be on here based on either data or experience on those 2 things. So looking at it from that aspect, I would say is how I would justify that.
Awesome. Yeah, that really makes sense. So using data as much as possible to justify, maybe asking a question that they might be like, wait, what? You don't know that? I was like, well, actually, I've done my own research and you told me you wanted this page completely redone. But actually, looking at the conversions, this is the highest converting page or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
And then I love this idea of educating the client so that you're, saying, look, I don't know your business as well as you do. So you need to give me the information so that I can do I can get the results you're looking for. But I can't do that without asking questions that might be perceived as, a little bit basic for you, but it's important for me to understand. So I love this idea of being humble. Something that you said at the London Webflow meetup that I thought was fascinating was that essentially, like, you are trying to give them the most honest answer possible, even if it might not be in your business interest to do so, which I thought was really interesting. You were talking about how, sometimes Webflow might not actually be the best platform for your client, even though you're like, hey, we're good at Webflow, we can do this, we could probably make it work, but actually there's a better solution that I think would work better with their particular business. Can you tell me a little bit about why it's important to be honest with the client, even though you're maybe like, damn it, I really want to work with these people, but actually maybe we're not the best suited to do that with this particular platform?
Yeah, for me, it's about trust. Really, what you're trying to do is build a trust and a good relationship with people. Now, if you're open and you're honest and you talk about things in the right way, in the way that you would also expect to receive that, that means you'll be remembered for that. So then when that next opportunity comes along, you're there to take not advantage of it, but to take it then at the right time. And your relationship will be in a much better position based off that. You've already gained that trust, you've already got that there. So just to be that transparent of saying, yeah, we can't do this for you, we don't have the experience to do it, either put them in the capable hands of someone that you trusted with or you've worked with in the past. We'll always allow that to happen. The one thing to always remember is sometimes people don't stay in those companies forever. They move. So if they're working in one organization, they move to another organization, they might come back to you with their opportunity, and it is something then that you can work with them on. So you're building a friend, a connection, a trust relationship with that person on a one-to-one level as much as you are as a company level as well. So that's always something to be mindful of as well.
Love this idea of basically being an ally for them to get from A to B. And that might not mean that you are the best person to guide them on that A to B, but you're just saying, look, I actually think you're better off, working with this platform, or potentially there's this person that I want to introduce you to. And
Yeah.
that kind of comes back around, which I think in the long term probably is a lot better for business, which I think is a really important idea for maybe younger Webflowers to understand. Tell me about failure number 2, comprehensive testing.
So testing is one of those things that people think, oh, we'll rush through that. We don't really need to test it. It's fully tested. But actually, testing is the fundamental part of whether something works or not. If something doesn't work, you've broken the user experience. You've broken that trust in terms of with the client. You've just said, I've just spent a load of money in terms of marketing this stuff. My website's broken. I now need to pause that. To not have the fundamentals of testing in place to be able to make sure the site's working across all browsers and doing all the things and the interactions you need it to, linking off to the right pages, is just a fundamental, really. And we have a testing team here who are really capable of putting very simple structures in place that don't need that in-depthness, but able to make sure that website is out in the ether in the best way possible. But yeah, really important for me. I just feel it harms user experience when you're on a website and it's broken. It's a bit of a no-no in my eyes.
So, I mean, you've got a Q&A team. Mm-hmm. So before a website goes out, that's part of this deployment, last of the 4-step phases, I guess. Do you think, because I think it's interesting how different agencies have different systems and processes, do you think that the person that built the website shouldn't actually be the one that tests it? Like, it should be a completely separate person?
Absolutely. Yeah. Our guys are always testing. If we're building out through a website, they're making sure the connections are working. They're making sure that, it's working across the breakpoints. But you get blind. You get very easily blind, not only to the copy and the content that you're putting in, but to the output at the other end. So we go through a couple of phases building out smaller Webflow websites where we will get the content team to read the copy on the site to make sure that that's coming across in the right way possible. And that's regardless if we've written the content and the copy ourselves as well. That's just to help support making sure that message is coming across. But then, it goes into the QA team, and that QA team then support in terms of browser testing, user testing, broken links, that kind of thing. And then we'll run, again, other analytical tools as well that'll give us information in terms of whether the site performs the best it can be, and whether that needs a bit more compression because of it's not going to load on certain devices or certain bandwidth. So lots of rigorous in there. But I definitely advise against you being a one-man band that kind of does it all, if at all possible. If you can't, you learn your trade quite quickly of certain aspects of that, but it's very much easier to use a wider team.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a ton of sense. I think there's probably a lot of Webflowers that are listening now being like, yep, I've sent a half-baked website to a client thinking it was fully done, and then they checked it and it really wasn't ready. So yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess from the perspective of, an agency, if they've got like a Q&A tester that's got, set SOPs that they can just tick through and follow, then that's maybe the better way of doing it. And I know Flow Ninja agency actually have like a free checklist that's really comprehensive to go through. If anyone's listening and is like, I really should make a checklist, well, I'd recommend going off that and making your own from there. Really important to do. Have you had any, like, in terms of the deployment phase, there's a lot of people that are like, well, yeah, of course I want to Q&A it, but sometimes the client's like, hey, we need to get this thing up yesterday. Have you had any scenarios where you're just like, oh God, we just got to get this published, and then been like scrambling and sleepless nights to try and fix stuff? Or is generally the process with Proctors just so, because I'm imagining it just like so perfect, like an IKEA, system where it's just like boom, 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 boom. But have you had any shockers in the past?
Yeah, we have had a couple of shockers. The ones that are difficult are the ones where the client wants it doing on a certain day. Now, we never run a deployment any other day than a Thursday. You don't want to do it on a Friday. You're going into a Friday, you're going into the weekend. They're ringing you up on a Saturday and a Sunday saying, this isn't working, that isn't working, and it's not fixable. So Thursday deployments happen for us, but there are occasions where a client might want to say, the quietest time on my website is actually a weekend, and we'll take time out to be able to do that. So, get up at 3:00 in the morning and deploy it then, as opposed to doing it at a regular time where they're going to get a lot of interactions on the site. Webflow is pretty easy for in terms of getting the site done if you've got the DNS and you're able to sort all the domain name servers and stuff like that out. But in terms of some of the other systems and applications that we've worked on before, we've had some things where things haven't always gone to plan. Redirects, 301s not being implemented place, 404 pages popping up left, right, and center. But yeah, you try to limit that as much as you can when you're working on big enterprise level clients. It's actually the smaller clients that sometimes you work with that put you under the pressure of wanting to get it out, because at the time is very much the money with them. I need to get it out to start generating revenue. But you can only explain as much as you can explain on best advice in some areas and instances.
Speaking of what you just said there, like smaller clients, bigger clients, what is a smaller client to Proctor's? Just to understand the kind of, because you've got, Panasonic, Epsom, these might not be so relatable to your average Webflower that's listening. What's a smaller client for Proctor's?
We do work with organisations such as charities. So we've worked with Young Bristol recently. As a client, from our perspective, time is very much money to them, because being a charity and being a smaller organisation that might not have the depth of needing or having a bigger marketing team, for example, there may be only 2 or 3. We work with quite a lot of startups. So again, you get some organisations come to you, I need a website out very, very quickly. It's a single page landing page or one page website. So we've worked with a couple of organisations in America. So they might be just 1 or 2 people. For me, they're the exciting ones, because they're the guys that are getting ready to get out into the big wider world, want to get things done quite quickly, and you really want to nurture those guys to then turn into something much bigger. Just recently we were working with an organization over in North America, a telephone based organization, only 4 or 5 people within the team. So lots of companies we work with. I would never not work with a small company, because it's the smaller companies that often have the biggest potential in terms of being able to support them. And there's nothing better than working with organizations where they've become really, really successful later on in a couple of years. So, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like I'm on Dragon's Den. You're like looking at the potential of these companies and seeing, if they're going to grow kind of with you. But I think that's an important point for maybe Webflowers listening, because you might think, I'm not going to take on this project. It's below my budget. This is what I charge, and this is my typical project rate, and I don't go below this or whatever. But I do think it's interesting to consider that working with people at different stages, depending on, what their scope is at the time. And obviously you don't want to feel resentful for doing work for people ever. But I do think it's important to consider that, if you look at people as potential partners rather than just a one and done job, someone just asking for a landing page, they're not asking for just a landing page. They're asking for someone to create that initial project scope, but no one just needs a landing page, or very rarely I would find someone who just wants a landing page. Normally there's CMS and all sorts of stuff to come. So I think that's really interesting that even an agency as large as yours, Dan, is thinking along those lines, and maybe freelancers should consider the same type of mentality. I think it's fascinating. Tell me about failure number 3, due diligence in hiring.
This is a pretty important one, really, in terms of creating the right culture with where you work. We got a great team here, and they're a team that have grown with us as a business, and your primary concern is always about supporting them and getting the right people in at the right time. Now, there's sometimes instances where you win a pretty big client contract, and those teams are going to be under the cosh quite a bit of the time if you don't sort some resourcing out. And there's 2 aspects that you've got your freelancer resourcing in terms of having someone that's reliable and being able to deliver, but that communication that I was talking about earlier, is that going to be good enough to be able to deliver the project? Or am I going to bring somebody into the organization that's got to work with the rest of the team, gel with the rest of the team, and then prove the rest of the team all at the same time? And we've not always got that right. We haven't. We've had people in the past that just either haven't been the right fit, even with the clear guidance and information that they've needed to get going, or they've not found us the right kind of company that they wanted to work with as well. And it's a difficult thing to get right. It's not a case of going out there and going, oh, you can do Webflow, or you can use Figma, and you can fill out a timesheet, etc. You know how to do an email. It's more than that. It's about getting the balance right. It's about making sure they're going to work with your team, and that your team are going to feel comfortable working with them as well. That's really important. But yeah, doing it too fast can be quite costly as well. You've got recruitment costs when we're working with recruiters, and bringing those guys in and finding out they don't work after a 6-month or 12-month window can often be quite a costly exercise as well. So you kind of want to avoid that from a multitude of areas, really, whether that's the business side, your team side, and also the productivity that you're getting out of that individual to deliver on the work you need to.
So what's the key with hiring then?
I think it's to not rush into it. Don't think, I've got to get this done, I've got to get this out. There are plenty of people out in the world from a freelance perspective that can support you on that transition. So as a growing business, if you're growing from 1 to 2, or you're growing from 2 to 4, who's the next person that I need to bring in? You've got to get that right. And a lot of the time, sometimes a lot of it plays within your heart and in your stomach of knowing whether that person's right, and that can happen through just an initial conversation before you get into the technicalities of work. But take your time on it, think about it, maybe introducing them into the team, making sure that the team are feeling like they're going to be able to work with them. There are quite a lot of things to do on that, but I think taking your time is probably the most important thing to get right. Don't rush into it.
And I guess that's an interesting point that you made as you started speaking there about depending on what size of team you have, that order of kind of hiring. So say you're a developer and you're weak in design. Are you saying, okay, that makes sense to be your first hire, or maybe someone that you do a couple of projects with, see if you enjoy working with them, then potentially bring them into the team if there's enough consistent work, if you could potentially do that? Is that the kind of framework in your head as to like how someone listening might approach that?
Yeah, I guess it depends in terms of that, where you are on your hiring journey. But it's to make sure, I think when you're a smaller team, you need people to be a bit more resourceful in terms of what it is that they can do. So, if you've got a designer, have they got an ounce of being able to do a bit of branding in with that? Or have they got the capability to do some copy? So you might want to start to think about the breadth of who it is that you're looking for rather than just the specific nature. But as your team starts to grow, you're looking for more specifics around that. You're looking for maybe somebody that works in strategy, so that's going to help you bring in new work or developing that work that you're working on that little bit more. And strategy can go into planning strategy or delivery strategy. And that, again, that minutiae around roles becomes even more apparent. So it's a smaller team, you're looking for breadth in skill and someone that can do a little bit more. But I suppose as you're getting higher and bigger, looking at the real detail of what it is that you need to make sure you're getting a really good delivery partner in that area. It's a difficult thing to get right. And as you go through different scales of growth, it's really kind of working out what you need for the right now and into the future.
That makes a ton of sense. I guess there's kind of like, you've got the T-shaped people who've got, a couple of different skill sets, and then they've got that one deep depth of thing that they're, really, really talented at. But maybe at the start, you're kind of looking for someone who can do a lot of different skill sets, but fills the main big hole that you have, and then you kind of can go from there. But what you're saying is that it is better to build a more permanent team generally. Like that is seemingly what Proctors has tried to do in terms of, you've got a physical building, you've got workers that come into that building to do work together consistently. And only when you're missing a depth of skill set in one particular quite niche area, seems that you're saying that you might hire a freelancer that you trust to come in and like slot into your team as and when you need it. But is that kind of how you're approaching your agency?
Yeah, it's primarily the way that I like to do things, because I feel when you've got somebody working with inside the organization, they can add as much to your organization as they do to your clients. So thinking about your own brand and the way that you want to develop your own brand, and those instances, how you want to do that. We've gone through various hiring processes in the past where I've worked with freelancers for a period of time, and it might be that budget only allows them to work with you for a 3-month window. So then freelance does become the option for you. Or, people have gone away on holiday, or they've taken a sabbatical for 3 or 4 months. So you just want to plug that gap for a period of time. There's your freelance options are there. But for me, it's about building a team, building a happy team, building a team that can become successful, and actually seeing them grow as well. And what I often find very interesting is when somebody comes in and you've brought them into a specific role, there are some people who are so flexible that actually they start to find what they enjoy doing when they've started working with you. And what you've brought them in for originally isn't necessarily where they're going to stay, and they're going to grow and they're going to move, and they might move up into different departments, head of department, or director level or something like that. But yeah, bringing them in is always a preference for me.
Okay, very interesting, because I'm kind of on this journey with Maku Studio, this agency that I'm working with, this guy called Arnaud Ross, and we're very, very early, but we're having conversations like this. Do we want to bring in full-time staff? Are freelancers the right people to work with? How do you even find the right freelancers to work with when you've got like a one-off project? And, these are the types of conversations that we're having. So it's really, really fascinating to have insights from someone that's been doing this for years and has that level of perspective. Question on that: who is the most critical hire that no one talks about but should?
That's really a good question. For me, where am at the moment, it's around the finance. Finance for me, in terms of someone being able to give you that information of where you're at, where you're going, what your trajectory is looking like, is very, very crucial. People that manage projects are often very, very much underrated. They're the glue between your working team and your client team. They're the ones talking to the people who are paying the bills, essentially, at the end of the day. They've got to get that right. And they've got to get that from a financial perspective, timing perspective, client relationship perspective. It's a very difficult task, that in itself. But yeah, for me, it is a part of the financial team, and the account management team very much play hand in hand for me in that aspect.
And those are two different people, as
Mm,
in, like, you've got finance that are very much interlinked and talking to the account managers
correct.
of particular projects,
Yeah,
being like, we've got a one-off project, but is that going to turn into a retainer? What's the time frame there? Have you talked to them about this? What pain points they have? And then that can relate to the financial member or team to be like, okay, we can forecast this, and as a result, we're going to need to allocate these resources
correct.
to. Is that what
That's
you're
it.
saying? Just to
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Financial director, for example, financial manager within the company, and then your account managers who look after those client relationships as well. It's funny, Jack, really, because you can go around the business and then you start thinking, well, actually, the other really key aspect to that is new business. So the people that go out and get the new business, again, very, very critical to your organizational success. And then you think, well, actually, I need the people inside the company now to start delivering on that work. So now they become, so it kind of changes as you go around the business. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is when you're bringing somebody into a company, you've got to look after the team you're currently with, because they've helped you get to where you've got to today. So when you're bringing somebody else in, you've really got to think about, the effect that's going to have on that team, and how it's going to improve their productivity and the way that they've worked as well. So yeah, but at the moment, that's kind of, for me, the areas where I see those critical resources right now.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I don't know if this is a kind of acceptable question to ask, but you've grown an enormous team, and now you've got enormous overhead costs, which means that you have a ton of pressure to bring in new work. You need finance team, you need account managers. Have you ever thought, you know what, I could crush it as a freelancer? Like, I've got the contacts, I've done the business, I know all sorts about SEO, copywriting, I know who to hire. Have you ever thought, like, why am I trying to, wrestle with this enormous beast when I don't know? Is that fair to ask? Maybe it's not.
It's a fair question to ask. I think the thing that I've always done as a process is you always hire people that are better than you. So you get to a point where, you're always looking to make sure what you're delivering is the best it can ever be. And I've always hired people that are better than me. I actually think everyone in this company is better than everything that I can do. I'm just more of a guide, a way in which of kind of keeping everything running now. I don't know if I could go out there and survive as a freelancer and doing all the things there, because I just know the people I have around me are the best people out there for the job. And I actually think, for me, it's about keeping this place running so that these guys can keep running. So it doesn't cross my mind anymore to kind of think about it from that aspect. I don't know if I'd enjoy it either. I'd probably feel quite lonely. I love coming into this place and saying hello to everyone in the morning. I love hearing all of the things that are going on within different clients that I, sometimes don't even always get to talk to and communicate with. So just knowing that there's something here that is keeping everybody going is more appealing to me than kind of going out in the world and trying to doing it on my own, if that makes sense.
That does make a ton of sense. I mean, in my head, running an agency as large as yours gives me the heebie jeebies. But that just suggests that, you're in the right seat for you and I'm in the right seat for me. And I like to end these interviews by asking, off the back of the first conversation, what is your relationship with failure? What is success to you?
Success to me now is about the team, is about making sure we have a business that is successful. We have a business that helps the community outside that gate as much as it does inside this gate. I want to be giving back into the community. I want to be making sure that the students that are coming out of universities have got jobs to go into. I want to make sure that they're learning what they should be at university so that they're ready to come into working in the big wide world, because it's a scary place when you come outside of university about getting a job, finding a job. And it's really important for me to be able to make sure that I'm offering that as a resource, that I'm here as somebody that can support that mechanism moving forward. So we could grow to 120 people, we could grow to 240 people, but that number doesn't matter to me massively in terms of making sure that we're doing the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. It's not about making money, it's about making everything work well for everyone and the environment that I live and I work in.
Awesome answer. Yeah, money comes when you provide value, and then you can distribute that money to help grow and foster the next generation, which I think is an epic answer. We've covered your 3 failures up until now, but what is your next failure going to be?
Oh, I'm sure there'll be many to come, Jack. I'm a one for trying things and then not always working out. But I just, will always do my best to try and make sure that they turn into the best way possible. You might notice we've changed our URL recently. We used to be proctors.co.uk. We are now proctorsgroup.com. And that's because we are looking to move into the Middle East and working more in North America. So for me, I'm hoping my next failure will not be that we haven't been able to get that international reach. I'm working on it. I'm doing it. We'll do all the things we can to get there. But, I'm sure there's going to be a few failures on the way because I tell you, I've never done it before. And so it's going to be a learning curve. We're going to work out how we're going to do it. And then I'm pretty sure there's going to be some big failures along the way.
Some business development hires.
Absolutely.
But very, very exciting to hear that you're thinking about expansion and the next step for Proctors. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing as vulnerably as you have. It's been epic to chat through your thoughts on Webflow and agency life and giving some value to anyone that's listening who's coming up as well.
Pleasure, Jack. Thanks very much for having me.